So now we're continuing the Sikha, beautiful Sikha of the Rebbe, where he explains that Yitzchak made a big feast. Avram made a big feast for Yitzchak. It says either it was the day Higomel, it says either it was the day that he was circumcised or the day when he had his bar mitzvah. In any case, it shows being circumcised means that his connection was with God totally above understanding. And the day was a bar mitzvah means he was like born again, that God became his, he was not connected to nature anymore, it was above nature. In any case, Og, Melech HaBashan, said, I could crush him in 1 second. And logically, he was really right. You know, he's saying, what is this, all this big excitement about this little boy? Who is he? He's a nothing. And God said, you're going to see that you will fall, you and all the enemies of the Jews will fall into their hands. And we see that that's what's been up to now, but we still are not lacking any enemies. We're not lacking enemies. So nevertheless, the Jewish people come from Yitzchak that he is not affected by the world, the negative things in the world at all. Okay. The Rizal Zogt, the rabbis say, Ein korim avos elo l'shlosha. There's only 3. 1 second. I think we were from before. Excuse me. We did not finish this. Here. How Yitzchak was 3 years in heaven, right? Okay, nevertheless, let's all right, we'll learn to come. A state that says, as l'asi lavo, then in the future, vet men zogen, or if Yitzchak will say about Yitzchak, ki ata avinu, that Yitzchak will say, you are our father. I told you the midrash that it says over there, and finally it says that Yitzchak, he was willing to take all the sins of the Jews on his shoulders, and therefore will say that Yitzchak, you are our father. The Tam with them, the reason is, Perter Kleit and Chassidus explains in Chassidus, because Yitzchak is the thing of pachad and bittul. Yitzchak is this awareness of the awesomeness of God and total surrender to Hashem. Was das is the Eineker, this is the Einer from the Chidushim. This is going to be one of the big novelties of the future redemption. Everyone will feel God. What do you mean everyone will feel God? Everyone will feel that they're being created, that they're nothing but creations, and that everyone will feel that their existence is a big, big miracle. And they'll feel the Creator. That's scary. Ken men sagen, we can say, as therefore, gefind men, or if Yitzchak, we find about Yitzchak, as is given, that he was many ways similar to what's going to be in the future. Yitzchak was more similar to the future redemption than all the others. Or if all Avos, by all the other Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, by Avram and Yaakov, it says, Hetimu me'ein olam haba, that God gave them a taste of the world to come. Do you remember we learned that midrash just a few days ago? Shlosha Kodesh Baruch Hu hetim lehem tam olam haba. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Hashem Yisborech hadze. We said Bakol, Mikol, Kol is the world to come. Remember, Hashem gave them all a taste of the world to come. Nor, but by Allah Avos, by the others, Avram and Yaakov, is their me'en olam haba given blois their inyan from Tainug. It was pleasure. God gave them a feeling of pleasure. Abraham and Yaakov, he gave them a pleasure of the world to come. But by Yitzchak, is ein ganze Leben, his whole life was similar to the Olam Haba. Now, Olam Haba can mean a lot of things. It can mean going to heaven, and it can mean also the raising of the dead. And in some way, it's sort of the same thing. The raising of the dead. Why is it the same thing? Because both of them come after a person passes away, after he's was out of his body. And both of them are levels of pleasure. It says the going to heaven is a level of pleasure, and the raising of the dead is also pleasure. But the raising of the dead is something totally, totally different. It's nothing that we can in any way we can relate to. From by the Akedah, it says that Yitzchak tasted this all the time, because when Avram took Yitzchak to the Akedah, is Parcha Nishmaso, his soul actually left his body. Und sie ist nimshach geworden in a neshama de alma da'asi. And there came into him a new soul, or an aspect of his soul, that was the soul that will be revealed in every Jew in the future world, in the raising of the dead. The emes is noch, is gorn, we'll see it's even more than you think. The emes is noch nid das was the Mila from Yitzchak. This is really not the true the true praise of Yitzchak. Varum, they're Indian from Parcha Nishmasam, because this idea, this soul left his body, gefind men euch by other people. There's some people that say that also the son of the Shunamit. Remember the whole story with Elisha, and promised that Elisha brought him back to life. And by Nachander, by others. It says by everybody on Mount Sinai. It says the Parcha Nishmasam. It says the story, but there's the story of in the prophet Ezekiel, that God told him to enliven the dry bones. Remember, Atzmos Yaveshot, told him that. Well, some people say that these were people that actually had died, 20,000 whatever Jews that they tried to go to the land of Israel against God's will, Mapilim, and that God killed them all, and that He went and He enlivened them, brought them all back to life. This is all these people also, their souls went out of their bodies. And so, okay, in any case, the Maila from Yitzchak was Eres Geven Lamaila Mia Olam. He was above the world, und hat from dort mitgenommen in Olam, that he was simultaneously from the upper world and he was in the world. Like we're going to explain later. What does this mean? That his body also went up to heaven and it sort of stayed there. But he came back down. Let's see what happened. And we're going to bring a proof that Yitzhak was in heaven. He wasn't here for 3 years. Oifen Pasuk, it says, Vayigdal Narim, when it says that the children got big, it says, as Beshaz Zezainen, Gavoren als 13 Yor, when they were 13 years old. When they were 13 years old. This is Esav and Yaakov, right? Zeh firt labeti midrashos. Yitzchak, he went to learn Torah. Zeh firt laved Zorah. And Esav went to worship idols. Oiv them, it says, as this is just translation in Yiddish. Oiv them, it says that Avram should have really lived 180 years. That's how long Yitzchak lived, 180 years. All of the Avos were supposed to live 180 years old. But Avram lived only 175. Why? Nor men hatarop genommen bayim finifior, but 5 years, God took Abraham from the world 5 years early, kadei zolnit zen, so he should not see that Esav, sein Einikel, his grandson, became an idolater. Kumtoy, so it comes out that when Esav is doing idolatry, as Abraham was still, what? Hat noch Abraham gelebt. Abraham was still alive. Why? Warum? So Yitzchak, because Yitzchak was gebort in Avram when Abraham was, when Yitzchak was born, Abraham was 100 years old. And Yitzchak was 60 years old when he gave birth to Esav, right? So if so, so comes out that when Esav was born, Avram was 160 years old, right? When Esav was 13, that's when he started worshiping idols. So then how old was Abraham then? He must be that it was 173. Huh? Yitzchak, when Abraham gave birth to Yitzchak, Abraham was 100. When Yitzchak was 60 years old, he gave birth to Yaakov and Esav. How old was Abraham? 160. Yaakov and Esav separated their ways. Esav went to worship idols when he was 13. Means that Avram was 173. Avram must have been 100 dry und 70 Jahre. He was 173. Hat doch 2 years, so therefore there was still, and Abraham died when he was 175. So if so, Yitzchak started worshiping idols when Abraham was 173. So there's still 2 years. There's still 2 years when Esav was evil. Avram could have seen him. 2 years. Okay, some people say, well, no big problem. Maybe Esav did these averas when he was in quiet, right? The Das Zakanim and Bali Tosfos, they answer like this. They have the same question, and they say that these 2 years that Esav did sins, but he did it in secret, but matmonios. All the time that Avram was alive, he didn't see him, right? Didn't see him. Says the Rebbe, oh, that's a nice answer, but it's not sufficient. Why? Because if he was going to hide him for 2 years, their tiritz is aber nit genug. It's not good. Warum? Gekent sein, as zindik 2 Jahre betmani. If you want to say that Esav was 2 years sinning in quiet, so, and Abraham was still alive, as hadach getent, so why did he have to die 5 years earlier? Why did hadach gekent sein as zal zindikin noch 5 year, 5 years in quiet? Und merzal nid darfen a rap genommen from Avram 5 year, didn't have to take away from him. And what's he saying? When Avram was 175 years old, right? According to this, Esav had already been sinning for 2 years. He's been sinning for 2 years. Just according to our computations, when Esav was 13, he started doing sins. When Esav was 13, Abraham was 173. Wow, that means that he's been doing, He's been 173. So why did Abraham have to die 5 years early? Why did he have to die 5 years old? Esav had already been doing sins for a couple of years. So it says, well, maybe he was doing sins in quiet. So let him do sins in quiet for all the time. What do you have to kill Abraham 5 years early for? In Asar Maimoros, there's another book which is called Asar Maimoros from Rabbi Riva. I have to look what this is Faran Nachateretz. There's another answer. That these years that Yitzchak was the days that Yitzchak was from the Akedah until Rivka were these 3 years. When Yitzchak was in the Akedah, he was 37 years old, right? Yitzchak. When did he get married? So it says from the Akedah until he got married to Rivka, these were 3 years. That he got married to Rivka when she was 3 years old. So he had to wait for these 3 years. Good. 3 years with a day. All these 3 years he was in Gan Eden. These 3 years don't count in his life. Ken Menzogan, so we can say, Dem Tam, the reason is Gan Eden is a higher level from Zman, from the world. So therefore, when Yaakov and Esav were 13 years old, so these 3 years, right, that Yitzchak was, what did he say? Yitzchak was 60. Well, 3 of those 60 years, or actually you can add on 3 more years to those 60, because the 60 years that he was 60 years old was not 60 years after he was born. It was really 63 years after he was born. But 3 of the years we don't count. This showing durchgegangen mehr wie 62 Jahr. Therefore, it's more than 62 years. Aber alt, he was only 60. Why? Because the years that he was in Gan Eden, given Lamaila, that was above time. So therefore, Avram is then, so Avram, he kept living, right? He kept going on. He kept living. So therefore, when Avram was 175 years old, right, as Yitzchak should have been a little older. Alt gewen 162 Jahr. He should have been 162 years. When Yitzchak is gekommen in Olam und in Zaman. Yitzchak came back. So therefore, these 2 years, they were not in the calculation of a 60 years old. Okay, so what's going on? What happened again? If we say that Abraham died when he was 175, so it comes out that 2 of those years, Yitzchak and Esav was sinning. 2 of those years he was sinning. What happened? So he says, how are we going to get rid of those 2 years? So it says, no. The fact of the matter is that Esav was 13. But the whole problem is when he was born. He was born when Yitzchak was 60 years old. It says, yeah, he was maybe 60 years old after his birth. But there was 2 years there that he wasn't in the world. We don't count those 2 years. We don't count those 2 years. So it ends up that we don't count them. It ends up that when Esav started to sin, it was really 2 years earlier. And therefore, actually it came out, it was 2 years later. So therefore, when Abraham died, it was before Esav started sinning. Okay, what's the whole point of this whole business? That how old was Yitzchak? Yitzchak was 60 years old when he gave birth to the children? No, he was 62. What about the other 2 years? He was in heaven. So therefore, as Paran, a mol, was men heipzich, oif, when a person can be higher than time. Yitzchak was actually higher than time. When später kommen dik in Zman, when a person comes back into time, is das nikar, you can see it. Azoy v'es Fran, like a Sicot, there's a story about the Baal Shem Tov. Was is geschrieben that he wrote to sein Schwieger. He wrote to his brother-in-law, Rav Gershon. It says, as an inyan was bepoil hat es passiert später. He wrote something that he said had happened, and really the thing hadn't happened yet. While their Baal Shem Tov is a rui from Olam Yetzira, because Baal Shem Tov went into the world of Yetzira, was Dordan, which there is 10 or 15 year beskirachas. Then you can see 10 or 15 years at one time. Time is much smaller than. Was hat im aber nit a rois genommen from Zman, from Olam Hazeh, which he was, so to speak, and taken from this world. He could see in 1 second, in the world of Yetzirah, 1 minute is like 10 minutes, right? So he was there for a time. He could see 10 years ahead. 10 years ahead. No, I'm sorry, not 10 times as much. In 1 minute, you can see 10 years or 15 years. And especially because his body was, at the time of Leah, he was below. Masha'en came by Yitzchak, which is not the case by Yitzchak. So by Yitzchak, both his soul and his body were not in the world. So that time was not counted. Okay, so what's the point there? What's the Rebbe want? The point is to tell us who Yitzchak is. This whole idea of Gan Eden, that Yitzchak's soul was in heaven, was above time, is by Yitzchak given Oich Dernoch Seine Diktamata. This was constant by him, even when he was in the world. Like we find by Yitzchak, as he was Koreach Hasadeh Asher Baruch Hu Hashem. It says that when Yitzchak came in to his father to get the blessing, so I'm sorry, yeah, he came into his, so he said, this is like a smell of a field that God blessed. I'm sorry, when Yaakov came in to get a blessing from his father, Yaakov, right, he put on the garments of Esav and he came in, so Yitzchak didn't know it was Yaakov, but he said, you smell like the smell of the field that God had blessed. We can ask a question. How could he have known? How did Yitzchak know what the smell of Gan Eden, of heaven, what it is? But he remembered from that 2 years that he was up in heaven, he had this feeling all the time. Even though that it is that when a soul comes from heaven into the world, it forgets. An angel comes and it makes them forget everything. But by Yitzchak, it wasn't that way. Yitzchak went into the highest levels of heaven, and when he came back down, there was no angel that came and confused him. Right? That's usually, that's how a soul usually is. That when a soul comes into the world, it forgets everything about what it was before it was born. This, aber by Yitzchak, it was that was hat mitgenommen, that which he took from the upper worlds in heaven and this level of Eden, like we were talking about from Eden, Gan Eden, he brought it into the physical world. Okay, so this is, what are we telling this story for? To tell us that Yitzchak was one of our fathers. If Yitzchak had the upper worlds in this physical world, he was not in the world and he was in the world at the same time. As we just proved, the 2 years of his life weren't counted in his age. So that is also passed down to us. He was our father. It means that was passed down also to me and you, as we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Have a good month. By the way, I said that we were going to say Hayom Yom every day, and I didn't keep that promise. So let's just say Hayom Yom. One minute. I have to find it here. Oh, I have the book here. I have a book. Today is what? The first day of Kislev. Kislev is the holiday of redemption, the month of redemption. Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler, he was a chassid of the first Rebbe of Chabad. There were times when he would wake up early in the morning and he would pray Shachris, and then he would pray Mincha, and he would pray Mariv, one immediately after the other. In other words, he would pray Shachris 6-7 hours, and then he would pray Mincha another few hours, and then he would pray Mariv one after the other, as is nit geven kein zman hefsech. There was no separation between them. Okay, my friends, see you all tomorrow. Have a Chodesh Tov, a good month, a blessed month. It should be the month of redemption. We should all rejoice together with the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach, now Mamish. 3 o'clock, there'll be a class. You're all invited. Invite your friends. Shalom.